Welcome to the Happy Bones, Happy Life podcast. I'm Margie Bissinger, a physical therapist and integrative health coach, and I am your host and guide on our journey to discover the keys to stronger bones, more happiness, and the secrets to live your best life ever. From nutrition to stress, from exercise to happiness, you will gain revolutionary insights from our leading experts. It is time for you to discover the health and happiness you deserve. Hey, Margie here. Would you like to learn some mind-body techniques that you can put into your life right away to help strengthen your immune system and reduce your stress? Well, if the answer is yes, then you are in the right place, because our special guest today is Brian Trzaskos. And Brian is a physical therapist and a bioenergetics expert and co-creator of sensation-based motivation coaching. He is nationally recognized for his work in coaching, training, and mentoring healthcare and human development professionals in the evidence-based practices of Qigong and Tai Chi and the new science of motivation. His organization, New Health, is dedicated to teaching healthcare professionals how to become the uncommonly centered, resilient, and motivated providers that consistently create the most meaningful outcomes for their patients. And that's how I met Brian. I was taking one of his Qigong programs, and I just thought his message was so great that I asked him if he'd share it on this podcast. So in today's episode, he takes you through the autonomic nervous system and what it's comprised of, and how balancing our nervous system and ways we can do that can not only enrich your entire life, but also strengthen your immune system. So easy, powerful techniques and lots of great information. So stay tuned. Welcome, Brian. I am just absolutely thrilled to have you here. For everyone listening, I met Brian at a course he was giving for physical therapists on Qigong. And his messages were so powerful, and how he talked about improving immunity and certain things we can do and a way we can live with what he's going to explain with our autonomic nervous system in balance can help every aspect of our health, but especially at this time when we all want to strengthen our immune system. I thought it was the perfect time to have him on. So I'm just thrilled to have you, and welcome.
Margie, thank you so much for having me. It was, I remember when we met at that course, and we had so many great sidebar conversations, and it was really wonderful meeting you and connecting you. We could feel your energy, and I'm loving being here today. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, great. Well, let's start off, because we're going to talk about this autonomic nervous system and how we can balance it and how that is going to really help us in so many ways. So why don't you let's get back to the basics so everybody understands what is the autonomic nervous system?
Well, I think we could talk about this specifically in terms of the immune system. I mean, I think that's what so many people are interested in that right now, because of the heightened awareness around, obviously, the COVID-19 virus. And how do we keep ourselves well? How do we keep ourselves healthy, considering, there isn't a vaccine, and we don't know where this virus is, and we can't see it. So who's carrying it? And it can be carried silently and all that stuff. So I think one of the most important things we can do right now is think about how can we protect ourselves by strengthening our own immune system. So when I think about the immune system, I go even a little bit deeper than that, and we think about the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is one of our nervous systems. When most people think about the nervous system in the human body, they think about the brain and the spinal cord and like the sciatic nerve and those types of things that when there are problems, we have pain associated with them. And the somatic nervous system is what we like to call volitional. In other words, we can choose to use it. If you looked at your hand and you said hand squeeze, I mean, you can make your hand squeeze, right? You can command it to happen. And so we have nerves connected to muscles that activate the body, and we can squeeze it. So that's what we call, the somatic nervous system, and it's driven by choice. It's right, it's driven by volition. We can choose to use it. But we also have our autonomic nervous system. And our autonomic nervous system is an aspect of our physiology that runs the parts of our body we're not thinking about. Like, I'm not thinking about the tone in my stomach. And like, I don't mean my stomach muscles. I'm like actually talking about my digestive system. Like, my stomach is, breaking down food, and my intestines are moving that food through and that all requires muscle activity, just as an example, that I have nothing to do with. I'm not thinking about that, but my autonomic nervous system is running that. My autonomic nervous system is running the vascular tone, how small or how large my blood vessels are. It's running my digestive system, how much those muscles are working. It's actually even running my postural tone, how much my muscles are working or not working just by sitting up in a chair or taking a walk down the street. You know, I'm not thinking about those things. My body's just doing that. And so my autonomic nervous system is a part of my physiology that's running the things automatically, if you want to think about it that way.
That makes sense. And so you talk about, so we're going to go in more detail into this, but you also talk about, and I think a lot of people don't differentiate between the mind and the brain. And a lot of people think that's the same thing. But when it comes to this, and it comes to our immune system, it comes to really everything, I think it's really helpful to talk about the difference and how that they interact.
Yeah, you know, it's really fascinating because we used to associate one with the other, like the mind is the brain is the mind, and we have a saying that, you know, your mind isn't just located between your ears. You know, your brain is located between your ears. Your brain is an organ. It's an organ like your liver, or like your kidneys, or like your stomach. It's a very important organ. It's a very, it does some amazing things. We obviously can't live without it functioning in certain capacities, but at the end of the day, our brain is an organ that does specific things. Our mind, on the other hand, I like to think about the word mind as equaling information. So mind equals information. And the information that we experience as human beings comes from more places than just our brain. Like, we have information that is associated with our body, so we call that our body mind. Our body is filled with information, and because we have all these sensory apparatus in our skin, in our muscles, in our sinew, in our bones, right? There's sensors in all those places that bring information into the brain, and then the brain processes that information. So we like to say, you know, we have a body mind. We also have what we like to say, we have, as humans, we live our life with three minds. The first is the body mind, like we talked about, right? So our body is filled with information. It brings all that information to our brain, and then our brain processes that information in order to make choices, if you want to think about it like that. We also have what we call our mental emotional mind. So people might think, oh, mental, there's the brain. Well, the brain is an organ associated in our body, so we're not discounting that the brain is associated with mind, but we're not saying it's specifically only mind. So our mental emotional mind, we obviously have emotions that we experience in our human experiences that feed information into our brain. As a sidebar, actually kind of interesting, Margie, is that from the Qigong perspective, what the Qigong Shui would say is that we have what we call a heart mind, that our heart is the area of our physiology that's associated with our personality, with our cognitive constructs, with our perceptions, with our, like, that's all actually a function of our heart. And we know that there are more connections leading from the heart to the brain than there are from the brain to the heart, in terms of what we call afferent connections. In other words, the heart actually gives the brain more information than the brain gives the heart in terms of decision making. So we have this whole mental emotional aspect of information, or our mental emotional mind, that our brain is given in order to, again, make choices or make decisions. So we have our body mind and we have our mental emotional mind. So we have body information and we have mental emotional information. And then we also have the third is what we call the natural mind. Well, that's what I call it, the natural mind. But some people call it collective consciousness. Some people call it universal mind. So it's a mind or a pool of information that lives outside of our local human experience. So, you know, we've all had an experience where we've been in the shower and all of a sudden this brand new idea comes into our head. We never had it before. Like, where did that come from? Like, we never thought about it before. We haven't had any experience with it. It's like kind of like a flash of genius or something. And where did that come from? It came from a pool of information outside of our local human experience. And so now our brain becomes a receiving station for natural universal mind or collective consciousness. So there's a really, like, we talk about those are the three minds, and all of that in our human activity, all of that mind information finds its way into our brain processing centers in order for us to make human decisions. That's the way kind of I like to think about it.
You know, what's so interesting about that is that it encompasses so many things, because we all know, and I teach in my happiness work, how important it is living from the heart and also being open to messages and guidance that we can get. So I think what so many people don't realize, all these pieces completely affect healing. And I know as a physical therapist, both of us have seen really miraculous things when we incorporate other therapies besides just thinking, okay, this muscle works, and when we go beyond. So I love how you broke it up into those three areas. So let's take that one more piece then, because I know what everyone's dying to know is, well, how can they use this information to not only help their immune system, but help their healing and just help them overall? So why don't you share some ways that you've used it, or ways that you recommend, or how people can use this information to really improve themselves and strengthen their immune system? We always want immune system. It's funny because no one really talks about it so much, but now,
Yeah.
now everything. Oh, does this strengthen? You know, it's become something that everybody is so in tune to, because obviously nobody wants to get sick. So
Yeah, and it is really fascinating. Again, from an energetic or qigong perspective, we look at it two ways. One way is that the immune system functions in order to heal what's already a problem, right? So if we already have a disease process, or we already have some type of physiological imbalance in our system, which is what disease is, then our immune system is responsible for healing what's already problematic. So that's on one hand. Now, on the other hand, the immune system is also responsible for defending our bodies against pathogens and viruses and other types of traumas and things that might happen. So our immune system kind of does two things. It heals what's already problematic, but also defends against the possible kind of thing. And so when we understand that, we can start to realize, well, how do we approach this? I'm the kind of person where I don't really like to shotgun stuff too much in terms of, I mean, I don't mind experimenting, but I like to work through processes, because I think for me, it helps me to create a construct of how to go about something in a way that makes sense to me, and a way that's researched too, by the way. So the process we use is, we always want to start in the body. Whenever we're going to think about balancing or strengthening the immune system, we want to affect the body-mind information systems first. And the reason we do that is because at the end of the day, as humans, it doesn't matter how spiritual you are, really, at all. If your back goes out, like, that's what you're worried about, right? I mean, you
true.
can be
If
the
you're
most
in bed, in severe pain, right, that's what you're focusing on.
That's what you're focused on, right? It doesn't matter how spiritual you are, your back goes out, like, that's what you're focused on. Like, how can like, the immediate physical sensations you're experiencing trump anything else that you may think that's important, or anything of that nature. So we want to start in the body systems first. And so we say the first thing we want to do is tune the body. And there's a couple of great ways to tune the body. And one of our favorites is using self-massage practices and self-acupressure practices. So there are key points in the body that you can do acupressure on that really will help to reduce chronic tension. I think if we're going to make any effect in the body, like the most important first effect to make in the body is to reduce chronic tension in the system, because chronic tension does all these really horrible things to us. It stagnates fluid flow, it stagnates lymph flow, it stops circulation of white blood cells, which are a part of our immune system. It increases metabolic toxin production. In other words, our body makes waste all the time. And so when we have chronic tension, we make more waste, and we can't get rid of the waste. So the waste piles up in our system, as well as our immune system not being able to circulate through our body as well. And then also our autonomic nervous system ramps up what we call the sympathetic division. So our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate goes up, our breathing gets shallow, and we actually experience more pain as well. So this chronic tension is really the first thing that we need to pay attention to. If we want to improve our immune health primarily, then we must lower chronic tension in the system. And self-massage is a wonderful way to do that. So we teach people a whole host of self-massage practices in order to specifically do that first. That's the first thing that we do. Does that make sense, Margie?
Oh, absolutely. Because the sad thing is that, you know, our society today, so many people have chronic tension. And it's just rampant. And it's interesting because I work with people with osteoporosis, and people always come to see me and they're so worried about, are they eating the right foods? Are they doing the right exercise? But they don't realize that the stress itself has so many negative implications. And for the bones, it reduces the osteoblast, the bone building cell. So it's just such a negative cascade, and it's so prevalent. And I don't think people realize that's the first thing they can do. And something as simple as self-massage is a great way to start. I know we'll talk about this later, but in something that you're offering everyone, you teach a little of the self-massage. So there'll be a resource for everyone that they can learn how to begin this self-massage, because it feels great and it's really powerful, especially when you're doing the acupressure points. Those are so amazing for making big differences. And that's what I love. These are easy techniques and these are things you can do. So continue. It makes complete sense. Yeah.
Yeah, super, super simple. And like I said, you know, we always start in the body because that's where we want to get the relief first, is in our physical bodies. Our backs hurt, our necks hurt, our shoulders are tight, you know, something of that nature. So let's go ahead and work where the problem is to start with, and create any little foothold we can in reducing chronic tension. So the first thing we always start with is something like self-massage. The next thing we do, we're still kind of paying attention to the body mind information, if you will. We do some very gentle movement practices. And the movement practices are, some people call them meditative movement or moving meditation. And, you know, so these are Qigong practices or Tai Chi practices, but they're really focused on certain principles of movement. We pay attention to our physical alignment. So we want to make sure our spine can get as long as possible. It doesn't mean we have to be up straight and tall like a soldier. We're not talking about that. We're talking about making, no matter what position your spine happens to be in, we want to help your spine be more like a slinky, like it kind of opens up. Like if you imagine if you had a slinky and it was all compressed down and smashed down, we want to just kind of open that slinky up and create more space between the bones. So, you know, and again, in whatever posture you're in right now, we can all just lengthen up the system and create more space between our vertebrae. So we have some very simple principles we follow, the alignment principle, and we move in very slow, fluid, and rounded ways. So the slow movement, the fluid movement, and the rounded movement actually has a specific effect on our autonomic nervous system, believe it or not. It takes our autonomic nervous system from the fight or flight stress part of our nervous system into what we call the rest and digest part of our nervous system. So it moves from what we call sympathetic into parasympathetic. And, you know, Marge, you and I have had this conversation before that, you know, if we're going to heal the body, our body heals best when the autonomic nervous system is balanced between sympathetic and parasympathetic. And if we don't have enough parasympathetic activation in our autonomic nervous system, we actually won't heal very fast at all. Our healing slows down, you know, very high percentages. And there's been a whole bunch of research done by a person by the name of Janice Geico-Glaser on the stress and wound healing, how much slower we heal if we're experiencing stress. So when we balance the autonomic nervous system, and easy to do that through self-massage and through slow, fluid, gentle, and rounded movements, that's a way we can begin to move into this parasympathetic nervous system, which will actually strengthen our immune system and stimulate healing.
So a couple things. It's so true. It's that this is so important in terms of really making sure that we can heal. And I saw this, I mean, over 35 years ago, working with patients with orthopedic issues and chronic pain, that once you started interjecting the stress and happiness teaching and all this, miracles started happening. People were getting better so much faster. It was really shocking to me because and again, this is a long time ago. And I've been doing this now, incorporating that aspect because it's so important. But I have two questions for you. So in terms of rounded, what do you exactly mean by rounded?
So the movements are kind of circular. So if you ever watched anyone practice Tai Chi before, you might notice that their movements are, they're not, right? They're not squares, they're circles when they move. So the movements are very circular or elliptical in nature. And so the corners are kind of rounded, or when the arms are going up and down, they're rounding when they go in those movement patterns. So think about, the vision I get is like a kelp forest under the ocean. Have you ever seen a like an old Jacques Cousteau kind of documentary, and the ocean's going and the kelp forests are waving back and forth, like that type of movement?
You know, I love that analogy because oftentimes people are so deliberate and they're like, I have to exercise, I have to do this. And then they straighten their arm out completely. So we call, they lock their joints, which is counterproductive. But I really like that. I never think of it as a circle. That was the first time I heard that, circular, but the circular and flow, you just start relaxing, thinking about that. When you think of these people who just sort of move, and we can all be that person, but that's great. And then just explain a little more in detail, because not everybody understands the parasympathetic nervous system, exactly what its functions are.
Yeah, and actually, so these are branches of the autonomic nervous system, like we had talked about just at the beginning of our podcast today. Is that the autonomic nervous system has three parts. We're going to talk about two of them: the sympathetic nervous system branch and the parasympathetic nervous system branch. So the autonomic nervous system, we've talked about it being as like the automatic nervous system, right? Like it runs the vascular tension and tone, our muscle posture, and those types of things we're thinking about. Now, the really interesting thing is that while the somatic nervous system, if I say hand clench and it'll clench, it's based on my volition, on my choice, and on my direction. Our autonomic nervous system actually changes based on our perceptions. So if we have a perception that we are threatened, or if we have a perception that we're in danger, our sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system activates. And when the sympathetic branch activates, because we perceive that we are threatened or in danger, our heart rate increases, our blood pressure goes up, our vascular tone gets tighter, our breathing gets shallow, our muscles get tense, because we are preparing to fight or flight. And it all happens very quickly based on a threat response. Now, because the sympathetic nervous system is what we call catabolic, it uses more energy than it saves. So it spends a lot of energy. That if we spend too much time in the sympathetic nervous system division, this is one of the primary causes of disease. And when I first heard this statement, I was blown away, but it's been validated again and again. What experts tell us, Margie, is that 75 to 90%, get this now, 75 to 90% of all doctor's visits in this country are directly attributed to too much sympathetic nervous system activation.
Wow, that's an incredible statistic.
75 to 90%. And so that adds up to over $2 trillion a year in medical costs. And this is pre-COVID-19 stuff, by the way, right? This is pre-COVID-19, that over $2 trillion a year is preventable because it's directly attributable to hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system, too much stress. So if we have too much time in the sympathetic nervous system, we break down, we get disease, and we're not good, and eventually we end up dying because of that. So there's the other part of our nervous system that keeps that from happening, and that's our parasympathetic nervous system. So that's the opposite of the sympathetic. So the parasympathetic, when we flip into the parasympathetic branch, which happens when we have a perception that we're safe. When we have a perception that we're safe, when we're supported, when we're cared for, then our heart rate lowers, our blood pressure drops, our breathing gets deeper, our muscle tone relaxes, our digestion improves. All that stuff happens when we go into the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's the opposite of sympathetic. Now, in our Western lifestyle, which is just wrought with fear and anxiety and time pressures and financial pressures and performance pressures, we're constantly bombarded with sympathetic stimuli indicating that we are under threat. And we don't get a lot of signaling that we're supported, that we're safe, that we're all right, that we're already good enough, that we're already, we don't get a lot of that signaling. So oftentimes we have to actually take separate time, or we have to actually create the space to create a parasympathetic nervous system response where our heart rate lowers, we slow down, we rest, and we heal. And of course, we know that the immune system is going to optimize when we're in a balance point between the two. So for a lot of us, we need to actually make a concerted effort to come into a parasympathetic nervous system response to balance out all of the hypersympathetic activation that we experience on a daily basis.
Thank you for just clarifying, because you and I know parasympathetic, but not everybody, really understands the difference. So that's great. I always call it rest and digest,
Yeah, and the other popular name for it is called the relaxation response, right? So Herbert Benson kind of coined that term in the 70s. So a lot of people say, oh, the relaxation response, that's what happens when you go into the parasympathetic side of things. So that's another way you can consider it.
Right. And the good thing, and I know you had just started with the body, is that there's a lot, and this is what I love about the work you do. There's so much that we can do to get ourselves there, and it's not difficult. And once you do these things, this is also the great part. Once you start incorporating them, your life will never be the same. It becomes enhanced in every single way. And these techniques are so powerful. So continue. Okay, so you were doing the body, the self-massage, and then gentle movements. And I interrupted you with the circular, but now I got it. And now I have that great image, because I love Qigong, and I love the Qigong that you do. And it's such a win-win situation. So continue. Okay.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what you said too, Margie, is this stuff is so simple, right? You do not need a doctorate degree or even a bachelor's degree to touch your own body and do some acupressure points. We're all massage therapists, and we all have one client ourselves. I like to say that, we're all massage therapists. We all have at least one client ourselves. And so put your hands on yourself and do some massage, and you get all the benefits as if you were going to getting a massage done. Obviously, when someone's trained massage therapist, there's something to be said for that, but we can all make a really powerful impact on our own health by doing these things for and with ourselves, and they're super easy to do, right? And they're super accessible, really easy. We can do them right now in this very moment, and without really any training at all, sort of thing. So pretty cool. So you have the self-massage and the movement. That's where we like to start. So we like to say tune the body. So those are practices to tune the body. Now, if that's all you ever did, you know what? You're light years ahead than if you didn't do that. So let's just say that right away. So take that first step, and you're going to be way better off than if you didn't do that. The next thing we like to do is talk about tuning the breath. So the breath is really interesting, because the breath is one of these autonomic nervous system processes. And when we say autonomic nervous system, what we mean by that is that if you're not thinking about breathing, you're still going to be breathing, right? We don't have to think about every breath we take. We can think about making dinner, or taking a walk, or walking the dog, or hanging out with friends, and we're still breathe. So it's an automatic process. So it's actually part of the autonomic nervous system. But we can also volitionally control our breathing too, can't we? We can hold our breath, or we can breathe faster. We can actually change our breathing rate. So the breath is kind of cool, because it's both autonomically and volitionally controlled. And because of that, the breath has, if your body was like a house, and think about your circuit breakers in your house kind of thing, you have lights and you have outlets and that kind of stuff, and all your lights and your outlets lead into the circuit breaker panel in the house. Well, the breath, what activates the breath leads back into the circuit breakers in your brain, in an area of brain called the hypothalamus. And your hypothalamus has a lot to do with your stress response. And so when we have a stress response, our breathing gets faster and more shallow. Well, it turns out that if we purposefully breathe slower and deeper, it sends information to our thalamus to actually change our physiology into a parasympathetic response. So we can tune the body first, and then we go to tuning the breath. And of course, our breath is linked with different emotions. So like when someone's angry, we breathe differently than when we're relaxed. When we're angry, we tend to exhale more than we inhale. Okay? And when we're sad, we tend to inhale more than we exhale. So when someone's sad or grieving, we gulp breath, right? We can't get enough breath in. And when we're angry, it's like right? We can't get enough breath out, kind of thing. And when we're afraid, we hold our breath. Our breath freezes up. So our emotions are very tightly linked to our breathing. So it turns out that since we can consciously control our breath and consciously change our breath, this is a way we can learn to auto-regulate our emotions. So tuning our breath actually is a way to tune our mental emotional mind. So remember, we talked about the body mind, and we talked about the mental emotional mind. So one of the best ways to tune the mental emotional mind is initially through tuning your breathing.
And how easy is that? It's great that you can fake out, no matter how upset or annoyed you are, you can completely fake out your system by really getting into a good breathing practice, a practice
Yep.
using breath. And we all have the breath and it's free. So what can be better? Great.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, anytime we start to move into that, the mental realm of starting to, process what's going on with us. So, because so many times we've got to process through things. Yes. I mean, that's really, really important when we have, like right now with COVID-19, the fear that's going on, or, a financial fear, or potentially, you've lost a loved person to COVID-19. And so we are dealing with grief, and we're dealing with loss, and we're dealing with those types of things. So to mentally process that stuff, we know that it's much more effective to process the mental mind or the mental information if we first have tuned the body-mind information, tune the body, and tune the breath. And then that gives us a better capacity to then begin tuning our mental processes. So that's kind of how we tune the first two parts. We tune the body mind, and then we can tune and balance the mental emotional mind as well. How are we doing so far, Margie? Is this making sense?
Oh, I think it's great. Would you mind telling them your favorite if people want to just get started right away on the breath? I know you're going to give your your information that you have with the massage, but if everyone's listening and they're dying, they're just going crazy. Oh my God, what's the breath technique? You've gotten everyone psyched up and everyone's tense right now. So is there one technique that you think people could just start with right away? That's one of your favorites?
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, the easiest one to start with, and it might sound really simple, but you have to do it, right, to have it be effective. So some people are like, well, that's so easy, and then they don't do it, sort of thing. So here's the thing. Imagine that you're cooling a big bowl of soup that's filled to the brim. Okay, so it's a big bowl of hot soup. It's filled to the absolute brim, and you don't want to spill anything over the edge. So we have to take that soup and go, and then let the breath come back in through the nose, preferably. Cool that bowl of soup again. So if you blow too hard, you're going to spill the soup over the edge. If you don't blow enough, you're not going to cool the soup. So, and we want to think about it taking twice as long to exhale as it is to inhale. That's the key. So we call it 4-8 breathing, Margie. In other words, put a clock up or a counter or a metronome or something so you can time this, but you want to breathe out for an 8 count. So you're cooling that soup for an 8 count, and then you breathe in for a 4 count. So a 4 count in and 8 count out, and at the bottom and at the top, pause for just a moment. So we blow out, cooling the soup, cooling the soup, cooling the soup, cooling the soup. And when you breathe it right down to the bottom, wait, pause, and then breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause at the top, just wait in that space just for a moment, and then that 8 count out again. So we call it 4-8 breathing with a pause at the bottom and a pause at the top. We know that that ratio does a really couple of cool things. It definitely activates a parasympathetic nervous system response. It starts to give us more control of our breathing musculature. Our diaphragm gets stronger and more skilled and more capable. And we also do something what we call toning the vagal nerve, the vagus nerve. So it's a vagal toning practice. So we get 3 things that are really, really powerful just with that little simple breath practice.
Oh, that's great. And the interesting thing, for some people that might be really hard because they haven't, but practice. And the other thing is, by doing that also, when you when you continue to blow out, you're going to feel your belly button going in.
Yep.
And you're also getting the transverse, you're getting some of the deep musculature to help with your back and help stabilization. So there's so many wonderful things with that technique. And it's great. So yes, I love that. That's very helpful. And as you said, it's easy, but yet super, super powerful. So thank
Right.
you for sharing that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, like I said, let's keep it simple, and let's not be tricked that because it's simple, it's not effective, right? I mean, I think a lot of times as people, we think, oh, it's got to be complicated for it to be effective, and if it's simple, I'm not gonna do it. But let's just like put our mark in the ground right now, our flag in the ground, and say, do the simple stuff, and it's going to make a big impact for you. Just keep doing the really, really simple things, back to basics, do that stuff, and it's going to have such a profound effect that you won't even realize how profound it is until you look back and realized how you felt, a few weeks ago or last month, and compare it to how you feel right now. A month later after doing it, it's like when you look back, you go, oh my God, I can't believe that simple thing made that big of a difference, but it absolutely does.
And are there certain times you recommend doing it? Like, do you have certain favorite times that you tell people that you really would like them to do this, or that get the most benefit from it?
Well, if you're going to set up any time of day to do it, do like maybe 4 rounds of 4-8 breathing or something like that. The best time to do it is first thing in the morning or right before you go to bed at night. So let's just kind of put that there, because that has to do with kind of circadian rhythms and brainwave cycles and that kind of stuff. But here's the other thing. I do these all day long. I do these when I'm driving in my car from the office to home, when I'm going to the post office, when I'm taking a walk outside. I get up away from my computer and do it. And that's the beauty about doing these breath practices. You can do them anywhere, any time of day. And the more often you do them, the faster you'll see changes in terms of your capacity to balance your autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, I love that, because your body gets used to it. Your body knows, oh, okay, boom. The other top place I love to do it personally is before I eat, because so often I find people are in the sympathetic state when they eat, and then they're not digesting their food, they're not absorbing their nutrients. The body thinks they're running from a tiger, and so it shuts down digestion. So I find that it's such a good time, and think about old practices, where we always used to do something relaxing. And in ancient, way back, or in cultures as well, all over the world, they say prayers, they do things before they eat to relax. And so often, I mean, I know me way back when I was seeing lots of patients, I would shove that food in as fast as physically possible to get to my next patient. And I certainly wasn't in the parasympathetic nervous system, maximizing my absorption of nutrients, etc. And so I always find personally, do you like doing it too, or any type of breathing before you eat?
Well, I think that's a great point, Margie. And I have to say that I am guilty of not slowing down before I eat. And so you have just inspired me to do that. So I'm going to start making that a regular habit in my life. And so thank you so much for bringing that up. I think that's fantastic. And it's so absolutely so true. You're right. I mean, how many people stop and say grace before dinner? And not only because maybe it's a part of someone's cultural practice or something like that, but physiologically, it sets us up to have a better digestive and meal experience.
Yeah, it's just, but I love that breath, because there's something interesting, because I teach many different ones, but so nice about what you just said is that when you completely empty, and you told us in the course too, which I like too, you had mentioned there's something very miraculous that happens when you really empty out, and then you open up to receive new air, and it's like getting rid of the old, letting the new in. It's very powerful. So on so many levels.
Yeah, well, like we had talked about in that coursework, Margie, most people do not empty our lungs at all during the day. And so most people are only getting about a teacup of oxygen per breath. But when you empty your lungs completely, your next in-breath, you get about 1 liter of oxygen. So you get 5 to 7 times more oxygen when you empty your lungs completely. And so we like to say that there's only one way to fill your lungs completely, is first you have to empty them completely.
Good point. And right now, we all want our lung capacity to be as strong and good, but always, there's no reason to be living without all your oxygen and be utilizing your lung capacity as much as you can for good, healthy living and feeling great.
Yeah, and absolutely right, absolutely right. And so can I tell you a little bit about the third step in
Yes,
reprogramming your
absolutely.
autonomic nervous system?
Let's
So
go.
here's the thing we like to talk about, and I have a little prop here I can pull out. Wait, where did it go? Oh, here it is. So we talk about it this way, where we say, I pull out a combination lock, right? And I say, okay, so here's a combination lock. And if I were to give you a combination lock, what's the first thing you need to, what's the first bit of information that you need in order to open that lock? If I asked you that question, what's the first bit of information you need?
The combination.
Actually, the first bit of information you need is to be able to see the combination, to actually see the numbers, right?
Yes.
No, you have to actually become aware of the numbers. And so many people, when they think about reprogram or bolstering your immune system, they just want to they just want to jump right into knowing what the combination is, and they're not even aware that there is a combination. Okay, because they can't even see it. So I could give you the numbers to open up this lock, but I'm showing you a lock right now that I've actually covered up all the numbers in. So even if I gave you the combination, you still couldn't open the lock, right?
Yes, absolutely correct.
Because you can't see the numbers. You're not even aware of the numbers. So first thing we have to become aware of the numbers, which is what we're talking about right now. So here's the numbers. The numbers are body mind, mental emotional mind, and then universal mind. Like that's the order that if you're going to optimize it, you've got to do it in that order, because that's the order as human beings that we process information. Too many times people try to jump to the end of the line and try to open up the lock. But I mean, I could give you this lock and say, here's the numbers, 16, 26, and 6. And if you go to the last one first and you try to open it, it won't open. You've got to do it in the right order, right? So the first number is actually 6. So that's the body mind. The second one is 16. There's the mental emotional mind. And the third number is 26. So when I give it to you, when I'm going to give you the last bit now, when I give it in that order, you can open the lock up, right? But you have to have the numbers and the order. So here's the last number. So we've tuned your body, we've tuned the emotions, and now we have to tune our purpose. Okay, so this is the last bit of it. And so many times people try to jump all the way to the purpose to make themselves feel better. But the problem is that our body is an energetic center. Our body is like a big energetic tuning fork. And the way tuning forks work, if you've ever seen a tuning fork, is that when you have a tuning fork and it starts vibrating and you bring it near another tuning fork that's tuned at the same frequency, the second tuning fork will start vibrating without the tuning forks touching one another. And that's because the vibrational frequency is transmitted through the atmosphere via particles that are in the atmosphere. And have you seen a tuning fork work like that before, Margie? Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. Oh, and I know where you're heading, and I'm so there with you. Continue. Yes.
Cool. So here's the thing. So by tuning our body and tuning our emotions, we are essentially creating a new resonant frequency for our tuning fork, okay? Because when our body's constricted, when we have a lot of chronic tension in the system, when we're having trouble breathing, when our emotions are bound up, like our tuning fork is not resonating at a very high or healthy level when we're like that. So it's very hard for us to connect with a higher sense of purpose when our body is physiologically shut down. So when we open up our body, we become a receiving station to be able to connect with information that comes from the universal mind. You ever notice that the time we actually get that flash of genius, it's not when we're stressed out. We get the flash of genius when we're in the shower, in a warm shower. We get the flash of genius when we're hiking in the mountains. We get the flash of genius when we're swimming in the lake. And here's the other thing. We get the flash of genius when we just surrender to the moment, right? Like we have a problem and we may seem like we're totally stressed and we say, you know what? I give up. I don't know. Bring me the answer, God. And we get the answer. Right?
Yes, we do. Yes.
That's when it comes. And so it comes when our physiology is more in tuned with the universal mind is when we actually become more aligned and connected with our higher purpose. We cannot find our higher purpose if we're stressed out, if we're tense, if we're tight, if our breathing is shallow. So that's why we have to open up the body first. That's why we do that way. And so connecting with our purpose is a matter of, there's lots of people do a lot of different purpose work. There's a lot of people out there who do purpose work, helping you to understand what your purpose. So I believe, actually, I know on a very deep DNA level that we're all born with a purpose. Like, I have a purpose. Margie, you have a purpose. Everyone listening to this podcast has a purpose. We all have a specific purpose, a reason for being here. And we sometimes might feel like we don't have one, but I really believe it's just because we've either forgotten it or it's been covered up with a whole bunch of other garbage we've been taught throughout our lives. And so when we can help starting to kind of clear a lot of that resistance out of the way, we can begin to tune with our higher purpose. So we have some processes we do. We do something called motivational mapping is one of the processes we take people through. We have another process we do called the Soul's Agenda process that my wife actually created and wrote a book about. So these are the ways to help people connect to their unique and unique sense of purpose on the planet that they can, again, begin to tune themselves with and live more purposefully through and from. So that's like the last bit. If you really want to reprogram your immune system and have a really healthy, robust physiology, then we have to tune the body, have to tune the mental, emotions, and we have to tune and realign and connect with our purpose.
So interesting, because I found during this time when people have a lot more time by themselves, or a lot of things are taken away that they normally keeps them busy, people are stopping and really thinking about their purpose and what they're doing. And it's just, for a lot of people, it's a time, a reboot really, and a time where they're really evaluating things and thinking maybe their purpose is a little different than they've been doing because they've just been so busy they haven't had time to think. Mm-hmm. So will you give us the links to those two methods that you've just discussed, the mapping and the where people can learn more, because I think that's so fascinating.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep, happy to do that. Yep, I can share them with you, and you can put them in your podcast notes if that's how you prefer to have them. And certainly, anybody who wants to go through a immune system reprogramming process with us, we have a whole free 2-week series that I did. I mean, you can go through it in a day now. I mean, it was a 2-week series when we did it, but over at our Motivation Beyond Measure YouTube channel.
Oh, that's great. And I'll have all the links. That's wonderful, because these are so powerful and they're not hard. And it's just a matter of after you do it, it's hard to see now, like, oh yeah, maybe I'll do this. But I can't tell you enough how if you commit to something and then you do it, all of a sudden life changes. But the purpose is really true, because so many people, that's also part of my happiness program, living on purpose. Because if we're not, and it doesn't have to be that your job is really your purpose, because not everybody is that lucky, but then do something else in life that is what your purpose is, so that, how sad to be, 90 years old and realize that, that really wasn't my purpose. We're at any level. It's never too late. It's never too early, just to sort of make sure that you are doing something that is your purpose, because if not, then it's easy to make different adjustments and your life will feel better and your health will be so much better and your immune system will be stronger. So yeah. I love all the pieces that you put together, and the way you've put it together. It makes such a nice program, and it makes so much sense. And I've seen in my life, totally what I believe in. I've seen that when you need these other pieces, because as physical therapists, oftentimes, okay, people will come in with a shoulder problem or whatever it is. You can't just work on the shoulder. And right. You said that so nicely in the course. You're not going to heal unless you deal with the parasympathetic nervous system. And you just need all these pieces for everything. So is there anything else you want to share? You've shared so much amazing, amazing information.
No, I really just think it's, start at the body, start at the bottom and work your way up. And anything you do is good. Anything you do is going to be helpful. And I really think it's the most helpful if you tune the body, tune the emotion, mental, emotional, can reconnect with your being state, your higher state of purpose, and how you would choose to be in the world. Like how, and I like to talk about purpose as a being state, because you can take that being state wherever. You can take it to work, you can take it to home, you can take it to the grocery store, you can take it to the restaurant, you can take it to the park, you can take it wherever you want to go, because it's how you be, right, in that way. And so, yeah, all those links are right over there on the YouTube channel as a part of that process we went through. And I would love for anybody who wants to go over there and check it out, go over and check it out, leave us some comments, ask some questions, share it with a friend if it's helpful to you. People have really benefited from it and absolutely loved it. It certainly changed my life, and it's been wonderful to see it change the life of thousands of people that I've had the opportunity to work with over the last several years.
Are there also some Qigongs in there too?
Yeah, the practice is based on a Qigong practice. So it's a whole bunch of great stuff over there that you can check out. We have a couple places you can, again, the YouTube channel, the Motivation Beyond Measure YouTube channel is a great place to check out. Also, the Institute for Rehabilitative Qigong and Tai Chi is a great place for people to check out if they want more Qigong and Tai Chi specific stuff as well. That's another place you can go.
Great, because after I took the course, I now am doing your program that I haven't started yet, I have to be honest, but I have this, because I love Qigong, and I practice it on a regular basis, but I always like to learn more, and I was very impressed with the Qigong that I learned in your program. And so I have all the information, I'm ready to go, I just need to get moving on that. So this motivated me talking to you today, Brian. I'm ready to start increase my Qigong practice to try to incorporate and just go through your teachings that I'm part of right now. So the certification, so all good, all great stuff. And I can't thank you enough. And everybody has the links, and do try these things because they are so life enhancing, as well as the other benefit is that it really strengthens your immune system. So, and let us know. I'd love to hear how everybody's doing with this because it is so powerful. So thank you, Brian. And I look forward to keeping in touch. I'll let you know how I'm doing with my program.
Yeah, please do. Reach out with any questions at all, Margie. And thank you so much for having me here today. It was a great joy to be here with you.
Well, thanks so much. It's really been a pleasure, and look forward to keeping in touch.
I hope you've enjoyed today's talk with Brian as much as I have. And now have some new tools that you can put into your life to strengthen your immune system, keep yourself relaxed, balance your nervous system, and just feel good. So all the links are in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Happy Bones, Happy Life podcast. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe on your favorite listening app so that you don't miss any amazing insights on upcoming episodes. And until next time, continue to live your best life ever. See you soon.